Thank you for joining us once again in Gods, Demons, and Magic. I'm your host, Sri Sachinandan Das. Today we'll continue our discussion of the Egyptian mysteries by Iamblichus. So for the last episode, throughout it we've been discussing the science or art of astrology. And we know that within ancient Egypt, the astrology has central importance. Especially the priesthood was expected to be well versed in the science of astrology. Clement of Alexandria actually commented that the Egyptian priesthood, they were expected to be knowledgeable in certain subject matters. They were expected to know the regulations of the life of the king, essentially to be a minister to the king, to teach the king what is mat, or in the Vedic perspective, what is dharma, or the various principles of religion with which the king is supposed to conduct the kingdom. You can see this today even in modern texts, for example, the Manu Samhita or the Parashara Smriti. These very ancient texts, they actually focus on the life of the king and how he's supposed to administer the kingdom. And you see similarly you have the Code of Hammurabi. Another thing that the priesthood was expected to understand was the hymns to the gods, the various mantras or prayers used in sacrifice in order to call down the gods and in order to please them and to make requests of the gods. So the priests were expected to be communicators with the gods, via mediums for human society. And finally, the priests were expected to be expert in astrology. They had to not only know how to calculate the stars and figure out, what are their positions within the night sky, but they also had to be well versed in the 4 books of astrology written by Hermes Trismegistus. In fact, Clement of Alexandria mentions that these 4 books are always within their mouths of the priesthood. So meaning they memorized them. They understood them just as a lawyer understands the law books. So we see Egyptian astrology was quite a bit different than the astrology that we practice today or was practiced throughout history. Rather, the Egyptian astrology was based on decans or deacons. So the night sky was divided up not into 12 constellations, but into 36 constellations, and each constellation being 10 degrees of the 360-degree sky. And so as the sun moved through the sky, it would move through these 36 constellations. It took 10 days for the sun to move through one particular constellation. And so the way that they would measure this, the movements of the sun through the constellations, was that every morning when the sun was on the eastern horizon or just coming up towards the eastern horizon, you could still see the faint constellations that are, before the sun. And the sun is moving counterclockwise through the night sky, through the constellations, while moving clockwise through the night sky. So as the sun was rising, gradually it's moving backward through the constellations. And so the constellation that it had just previously been in soon becomes visible after 10 days. It becomes visible in the night sky before the sun rises. And the Egyptians would begin this measurement, so like the first day of the year, the first decan of the year, was when the star Sirius was rising before the sun. And this actually, it used to happen at the first degree of Cancer, the zodiac sign Cancer. And so it's very interesting because this also represented when the Nile was about to flood. So when the Nile began flooding, Sirius would rise in the night sky before the sun every morning. And this is also kind of an interesting note that the astrological sign of Cancer, the zodiac sign of Cancer, is the sign of water. It's the sign of bountifulness and sort of the flowing of the ocean tides. And it's the sign of emotion. It's the sign of the mother. It's a sign of nourishment. And so you sort of have the Nile as this nourisher, filling the land and depositing the rich nutrients into the soil. And it was that flooding of the Nile which then provided the Egyptians for the rest of the year with their crops, because they were all dependent upon that cycle of the flooding of the Nile. So it was a very significant day, and that was the first day of the year. In Egyptian astrology, these decans, these 36 constellations, were extremely important. Each decan was associated with a particular daemon. In the beginning, the decans could be associated with gods or daemons, but later on, as time moved on, the decans became closely associated with particular daemons. And so what were daemons? Well, daemons are actually, the closest translation is it's a spirit. They're essentially, you have sort of the controllers of nature, these higher gods, which are in charge of the various movements of our world, including the gods of fire, the gods of sun, the gods of water. And so these sort of universal dominators, they don't deal directly with mankind. Rather, they have intermediaries, they have servants, they have messengers. They have sort of lower level gods, which pass back and forth between the human realm and the God realm. And so the universe in many ways was almost like a divine machine, like a sort of clockwork, where all the various cycles and movements of the heavenly bodies are manifesting in the lives of the individuals on this particular realm. But the effects, the powers of those planets, how they actually translate into a realm is through the via media of the Daemons, or messengers that carry that power into our particular realm of existence. And in modern times, we live in a very sort of dry, empirical, more materialistic culture, where the world is not seen as filled with entities or spirits, or certainly not living beings with personality. But in the ancient Egyptian worldview, everything was the world was a place filled with various types of gods and entities and daemons and evil spirits and ghosts and all of these things, and that the functioning of nature itself was very much a personal thing, meaning that there's personality behind it. Every aspect of life is connected to some particular deity. Now the Daemons, they were not considered necessarily good or evil. They could be either. You could have Daemons who in general are very pious and beneficent and kind, and you could have lower levels of Daemons, which are sort of vindictive and angry. Some of them acted as protectors. You could beseech them for protection. Some were more fighters or destroyers, like if you had an enemy or angry, and then you could try to enlist the power of a daemon to destroy them. And some of them are considered messengers, like Hermes almost, going back and forth between our realm and the realm of the gods or the spirits. Actually, you see this in modern Voodoo or voodoo. You have certain individuals who are considered messengers. In fact, before you even call the spirits, then you call those particular messengers, and they're the ones who go and interact with the spirits. And they're considered like gate masters, like they hold the key to the gateway between this realm and the realm of spirits. And so any particular ritual, you have to first go to them. So in many ways, Daemons have this particular quality as well. And some of them are just wandering spirits. They're just sort of like moving through this world, not engaged in any particular way. So we say that Daemons in many ways are, they're nothing like the modern conception of demons. Rather, Daemons are just sort of the realm of the spirits. They could be all sorts of the many different types of supernatural beings that are above humans but below gods. And the Egyptian conception is that these spirits, they have a job, like they're intimately connected to the movements of the material world. And one of their main functions is to enact the will of the gods onto our plane of existence. They're also considered connected to the creation of reality. Within the Vedic conception, you have a demiurge, or a secondary creator, who is in essence organizing the world. He's engineering it. And the Daemons are considered to help in that process. They take the thought forms of the demiurge, and they actually bring them into reality or manifest them. One interesting job of Daemons, in many ways they're sort of like a guardian spirit. They may be a personal guardian spirit to us, but there's also a daemon which brings us into our particular birth. So the time of conception of the parents, or sometime near that time, there's a particular daemon who it's his job to actually bring us into our mother. When the situation is ripe and a human body has been created, and then a daemon actually brings you, and he brings you at a particular time, a very specific time, which is in line astrologically with your destiny. And it's very interesting because in Jyotish, or Vedic astrology, the moment of conception is actually considered perhaps even more important than the moment of birth. If someone actually knows the moment of conception, they can cast a very, very accurate astrological chart. And therefore you'll see within the Hindu or Vedic culture, parents will actually use astrology to choose a very specific time in order to have a child, in order to procreate, to bring forth the best possible soul. So you can actually choose the astrological chart that your child is going to have. And so at that moment, one prepares very seriously to bring a special soul into the world. And this is used in conjunction with what's known as Garbhadhan Samskara, or sort of like, giving a gift into the womb. That's what Garbhadhan means, charity into the womb. And it's essentially at the time the parents will try to purify their consciousness and perform various rituals, especially and meditation and mantra, in order to put their consciousness into a certain state of mind. And then if they actually go through the sexual act in this purified state of consciousness, then the living entity which is taking advantage of that birth is of a higher caliber. And so many will also combine this then with astrology to choose a perfect time to actually create a very auspicious birth for a very special child. And so in the Egyptian conception then, all of this is arranged, this sort of extremely complex divine arrangement is made with the help of these daemons. It's his particular task to bring you as a soul and put you into your mother's womb at that exact moment when it's going to be in perfect harmony with your fate. And so within the Egyptian cosmology, you sort of have this divine realm of transcendence, which is beyond the cosmos, the realm of spiritual light. And then within that realm of spiritual light, there's a connection to a more subtle form of the sun. It's not the sun that we experience in this particular world. Rather, it's the noetic sun. It's sort of a spiritual sun or spiritual illumination. And this spiritual sun is sort of a representative of this divine transcendent light, this light of, in other traditions, known as the light of Brahman, or in Neoplatonism, the One. It is that brilliant realm of transcendental light, of which we as souls are part and parcel. And it exists eternally beyond the fetters of material existence. And it's the goal of the various systematic processes of spiritual elevation. And so the sun, in many ways, is considered a representative or manifestation of that within this particular world. And you also see this tradition within the Vedic tradition, or the Indian tradition, where the sun is in fact worshipped as a manifestation of Brahman within this world, or manifestation of transcendence. In fact, the Brahmins or priests within the Vedic culture meditate upon the sun 3 times a day, chanting the Brahma Gayatri mantra. And the purpose being to purify oneself and to situate oneself in spiritual consciousness as one goes throughout their day. Similarly, Egyptian priests also prayed in a very similar manner 3 times a day. It actually, whether it be Egyptian or Indian, they would actually pray when the sun is rising, and when the sun is at midheaven, and when the sun is setting. And so in this particular culture, and in fact in both these cultures, the sun is really considered a divine manifestation of transcendental illumination or power or light within this world. And that transcendental light is then sustaining and giving life to this world, and becomes, as we mentioned in a previous episode, it becomes really the soul of this world, just as you are a soul within your body. And the presence of the soul is actually giving life to the body itself. And so this transcendental light manifests in this world as this, on a lower level, as this physical sun, the ball of light that we actually see in the sky. And beneath, within the cosmic hierarchy of this sun within our sky, are the various planets, who are also considered gods. And then beneath the gods in this hierarchy, or the planets, are the Daemons. And the Daemons are then, the messengers, the ones who establish the will of the gods upon this earth. And beneath them, then, there's us. We see in the ancient Vedic literatures, which say, Savata Sakala Grahanam Rajas Samasta Sudamurti Reshesha Teja, that the sun is actually considered the king of all planets, the Rajas Samasta Sakala Grahanam. Means of all the planets, the sun is the king. And so it's very interesting how these two cultures, both Indian and Egyptian, are so similar. So the sun is considered within this world the divine manifestation of God, essentially, and it's considered the king of all the planets. And then from the authority or the power of the sun, which is the life force of the universe, then the gods are all drawing their power. And then that power then comes to us through their messengers, the Daemons. And it's quite interesting that within the Vedic literatures, as we mentioned, this Manu Samhita and Parashara Smriti, these different law books for mankind, including the Bhagavad Gita, which is considered a sort of spiritual law book for mankind. It describes how to do one's duty within this world in spiritual consciousness. And it was considered to have been handed down from the sun god himself originally into human society. It's sort of like the royalty of the universe, whether it be in the realm of the gods or in the realm of human beings, is closely associated with the sun. In fact, within the Vedic literatures, the various warrior dynasties, which are considered the natural rulers of the earth, one of them in particular is a descendant of the sun god. And this sort of rule of mat, or rule of dharma, is considered to have come down into human society, being established by a family which goes all the way back to the sun god. And so the idea being that the sun god, he invests within human society rulership and divine rulership and proper rulership in a sense on behalf of God. And on top of that rulership, he also invests within society the ability for those rulers to do their duty as a king in divine consciousness. So the king is not simply meant to do his job, like he's meant to follow certain rules and organize society in a way which is uplifting and beneficial to everyone within his kingdom, but also he's meant to be a sage, or he's meant to be a mystic himself, a king who's actually doing his job as a king in divine consciousness. So there's a combination of sort of worldly management with spiritual consciousness. And this is considered sort of like how the sun god actually manifests his royal power within the universe through these different lineages. And so it's just very interesting. You'll see within the Egyptian tradition, you have the pharaoh as essentially a divine king. He's a king who, he administers the laws of the gods on behalf of the gods. He establishes truth and righteousness and justiceness, and and also he's considered the head priest of society. The Egyptian pharaoh would, either have priests do it for him, or he would do it himself. He would perform the rituals, and he was the connection between the people and the gods. He was like the primary priest of the Egyptian society. And not only that, but the king is expected to do these things in divine consciousness. He's also expected to be a sage, and therefore he's honored as not a normal man. And so there's always been this traditional connection between the sun and the king, or the sun and the pharaoh. And so the king in many ways was the manifestation of the rulership of the sun and the gods, and sort of the presence of ultimately divinity, ultimately even above the gods, sort of this divine realm of transcendent light, this absolute truth. The king is meant to be sort of a shining manifestation of that in this world, and to order the world within that divine light. Actually, it's interesting in the Bhagavad Gita itself, it mentions this nashayamyatma bhavasto jnanidipena bhasvata, that when one is actually fully surrendered to God, and God within the heart, literally with the jnana dipena, with the light of knowledge, then shines out and blows away all darkness, and completely illuminates one from within. One is considered illuminated or enlightened. And then that enlightened consciousness, one can clearly see reality for what it is. It's kind of like you yourself are holding a light within you, the light of God ultimately, and is shining out, and then you can see the world clearly through that light. And so the ideal being that the king is shining out with his divine light, and therefore he can see things clearly. He illuminates the world like a sun that's actually present here within our personal experience. And so that's really the ideal of the king. He's a manifestation of transcendental cosmic power, as well as the system of rulership established by the gods and the very order of the universe itself. So you'll see in Egypt, he's sort of honored like a little god himself, a god amongst men. A Nara Deva, actually, in Sanskrit, means exactly the same thing. And Nara Deva is the title of a king. It's actually the word for king. And so the idea is that the more that one's consciousness is in harmony with this divine platform, just as an individual, the more that you're drawn to it and absorbed in it, and the more that you're conscious of it yourself, through your own spiritual practice, as well as through following the various laws established in the world by the gods, then you'll be sort of protected and purified. But if you're not, you'll be drawn to the qualities of the lower daemons. So there's higher and lower daemons. There's the ones that sort of assist and help structure with the order of the universe and bring knowledge to mankind. And then there's those daemons which deal with one's gross physical desires, lust and anger and greed, and these strong passions. So there's daemons which their job within the world is to essentially invest the world with those qualities or organize the world on that level of consciousness. And so if you're not absorbed in the divine platform of consciousness, then very easily you'll be drawn down and sort of surrendered to their particular qualities. So the Egyptians were very cautious about this. They didn't want to be drawn under the power of the lower devas, lower daemons, or seduced by them. And so there's always the temptation to give up one's divine consciousness, one's sort of moving towards that transcendent light, and one's following of the structure and the rules of the gods, and the following of Mut, or righteousness, or justice, or following the natural order. One is tempted away from this and can easily be seduced by the qualities of the lower daemons, whose job it is to manifest within human society the qualities of lust and greed and all of these various things which sort of drag our consciousness down. And as one becomes surrendered willfully to these lower daemons, you sort of come under the control. So there's a sense of losing one's freedom within the sort of Egyptian cosmos. And there's the idea that if you're not striving for the divine, you'll be deluded and attracted to these lower entities, their influence. And in doing so, you become imprisoned by them and controlled by them. So there's sort of this fear, also this element of the daemons which is controlling and negative. So in the next episode, we'll discuss further the relationship between these daemons and the Daikins, or the actual constellations within the sky, and how this translated to magic, essentially. So thank you very much for listening. If you found value in this, please like and subscribe. If you're listening on iTunes, please visit srisachinandana.com/iTunes and leave a positive review. Thank you again, and we hope you will join us next time on Gods, Demons, and Magic.